Okay, welcome to week 5 of Introduction to Criminal Law. Week 5, guys. And you should be aware of the fact that there will be another lecture on Friday night. That will be for week 6, because as you know, the quarter ends a week from today, next Tuesday. So, you have to have all your assignments in by that date. By looking at the calendar, we're going to talk about that in a little bit. So I'm going to get right into sharing my screen. Okay. As you can see down here, um, the lecture for today will take place, and then week 6 lecture will take place this Friday at 8:30 p.m. Central Standard Time. And then you know the requirements. Then, of course, the links for all the lectures are listed here as well. So let's take a look at our announcements. Let's open it up. In week 5, module 5, crimes against moral values. Chapter 7 of the text will be read, along with the activities drug laws, drunk and drug driving, distracted driving, hat crimes. It means hate crimes, actually. Um, Key terms for practice, drunk driving, and forced blood draws. Identify the drug schedule. And then your initial post, which is due tonight at 11:59 p.m. Central Standard Time, pertaining to drunk driving. And then your reply post is due Saturday. That's for week 5. And again, your written assignment has a hate crime been committed. Little typos in there. So correct those. I don't like to leave typos in there, so let's correct them anyway. I like to have things clean. I'm trying to get to the editing. Okay. Week 5 announcement. Okay, let's edit that. Let's fix that. Okay. And 8. Add the E there. And then the other error was brief introduction, drug laws, drug driving, distracted driving, hate crimes, key terms, drunk driving, and forced blood draws identified, the drug schedule, and quiz. Then further down here, has a hate crime been? That's what I had there. Okay, so now let's fix that up. So now let's go back to the course home. Sorry about that little delay there. Okay, and should be refreshing it now. And it should be there. Okay, so so the errors are now corrected. So anyway, the question is has a hate crime been committed? Complete the written assignment, which we're going to go over. And then as I started out, I shared with you my motto, adversity is the springboard to success. Very, very, very important. So now let's quickly take a look at our calendar. And then you'll begin to see what I'm talking about. Okay, I got some extra stuff in there, so let's get that 115 out of there. Okay, we got 15 should be out of there now. Yep. And you can see where we are now. We're at the week of the 30th. And you can see the assignment for today, initial post, your and live lecture tonight. And then this is a reminder of the live lecture for week 6, which will be Friday, 11:59 p.m. Central Standard Time. And then your reply post will be due Saturday. And your written assignment is due, of course, Sunday, 11:59 p.m. Central Standard Time. And then your reading assignment for Monday. Note that all the rest of your assignments are due that Tuesday. After 11:59 p.m. Central Standard Time on Tuesday, which we'll talk about on Friday, there will be no assignments accepted. None at all. So be aware of that. Okay. So now let's go look at Module 5. And again, let's look at the assignments. Okay. Your discussion posts, your written assignment, and one of the key things, and I've been saying this whole quarter, make sure you follow the rubric. Make sure you follow the rubric. This is a 3-part assignment. So you go click on this, and you see when it's due. Just a second there. This Sunday, 11:59 p.m. Central Standard Time. And then the rubric. And the rubric tells you, Part 1, you get 10 points for doing that right. Meets the minimum 1 page. Part 2, the minimum of 1 page. Part 3, a minimum of 1 page. So the whole thing, 30 points. And you have to make sure you cover these issues. Now, try to make sure you separate these assignments when you submit them. Don't give me part 1 of a paper, part 2 of a paper. Just separate it. And then, of course, you know about the rest of the module. It's the same over and over and over, making sure you satisfy these requirements. Of course, you know about Grammarly first. You've been doing pretty good with that. And then make sure you get your citations. And I've been saying this through some of your papers, that make sure citations are throughout the body of your paper, because citations provide support for the statements that are contained in your paper. And then references, and make sure you have a cover sheet, and make sure you rely on credible resources for a total of 40 points. So the rubric is the key. And I put comments in the rubrics all the time when I do grading. I have done grades 1 through 3. I am going to be working on 4 later this week. And then I'll start working on 5 after you submit your number 5 assignments. So you want to make sure that you get those assignments done, okay? All right. So now let's go back. And then you have your live lecture at the bottom there, okay? So now let's go to the actual module here, lesson content. The key again in your written assignments is to make sure that you use the rubric. So we're dealing with crimes against moral values, hate crimes, driving under the influence, And we're going to just briefly go over some of those things. And again, there's your reading assignments and so forth. So let's spend a little bit talking about drug laws. Next quarter, I'll be teaching, not next quarter, this quarter, T2, I'll be teaching drugs and crime. So I'll be going into more details of this. You should be aware of the fact that many crimes that take place in the United States of America are surrounded around drugs. And oftentimes people commit criminal offenses to support their drug habits. And that the the law relating to drugs deals with pretty much morality, but drugs also, as I said again, have an impact on individuals committing crimes. They'll commit burglary, robberies, thefts, even murders to get what they need to satisfy their habits. And so it talks about the fact that there are a lot of people who say, well, people use drugs, they're not really creating a problem. But their drug laws, it says, are unique from a criminal perspective. When drugs are ingested, it's a choice of that individual. And the person most at risk of harm is the person who uses it. You can overdose. I, for example, had a family member that I lost very close from overdosing on cocaine, brought on an aneurysm. But it says there are no victims in the traditional sense when it comes to use, possession, or sale. However, there are instances when innocent people are harmed by drug-related crime. For example, innocent bystanders caught in the crossfire of a drug-related war. Robbery, as I said already, may be motivated by the addict to get money to purchase drugs. And so the enforcement of drugs is what we're going to kind of spend a little bit of time talking about. And so there's various, the Uniform Controlled Substance Act determines and classifies drugs into schedules. And you should be aware of the fact that if you're in a Schedule 1 situation, it talks about drugs that are, it says, high potential for abuse, not currently accepted in the United States, and there's no safety. And then examples of that are heroin, LSD, ecstasy, and marijuana. Now, you should be aware of the fact that marijuana, of course, is changing. There are more and more jurisdictions now that are legalizing marijuana, and then there are still debates about it. But these others, heroin, LSD, ecstasy, and the others, mind-altering drugs, are on Schedule 1. Again, marijuana is on its way off of that schedule. The next schedule is some acceptable drugs, but there were restrictions, but people abuse them, such as opium and cocaine. And so those are Schedule 2 drugs. Schedule 3, you get into the over-the-counter type stuff you can buy in the store, Tylenol with codeine, or some things you have to get prescriptions for. They're for medical use. However, though, they are abused by people. And then you go down to 4, Valium, and so forth. The bottom line is that the abuse of the drugs, when they're intended for one thing, to help you in a health situation, but then people use them to get high. Cough suppressants are the lowest level, codeine, cough syrup, and things like that. So the violence that takes place with the drugs is a real problem. It says here, the real public enemy number 1, and it talks about reefer madness, cocaine used as an antidepressant and numbing agent for eye surgery. So there are some health things that people use these things for. Then in the 60s and later in the 90s, this crack cocaine came about. It was a cheap form of cocaine, and when that came about, it hit the streets and then was being sold in communities. People were getting hooked on it, and then it really increased the war on drugs. And they talked about the war on drugs from the 1980s with under Reagan administration. Just say no to drugs became a popular slogan. But although the war on drugs continues today, some success exists. However, though, the drug problem is major, and again, like I said, there's a lot of violence that takes place because of the drug culture. And so you can take a look at some of these more in detail. Moving right along here, talking about possession of controlled substances from a criminal perspective. There are jurisdictions that deal with possession knowingly. Actual possession occurs when a person has physical control, such as a bag or in their pockets or on their possession. Constructive, where a person has the right or ability to control the item, but it's not on their person. For example, a marijuana pipe within the automobile of the person operating it. So maybe someone else might be getting high in there, but you have constructive control of that vehicle. It's almost like alcohol, the same situation. You can end up being responsible for that liability. Controlled substance analog is a substance that substantially similar to a chemical structure of a Schedule 1 or 2 drug. And some examples are drugs, K2 or spice, that are like marijuana, and are controlled substances. The bottom line is that it mind alters. It alters the mind of the individual. And then there's a bunch of details here concerning possession and control. We are having problems controlling drugs, and then individuals who are incarcerated or arrested that are users of drugs, if they don't get the drug treatment, they're going to come back out. They're going to become recidivists. They're going to repeat crimes over, and they'll continue until that issue is taken care of. I actually often refer to it as a medical issue that needs to be addressed. Getting we call it getting the monkey off of their back. And so it's kind of hard when you lock a person up and you don't help them to deal with the issue. At the bottom here it says Florida and many other states like it have taken special precautions to specifically protect children from drugs, but they still seem to get control. Controlled substances not only put the individual user at risk of a long-term addiction and self-harm, but also everyone else that is around them, including people who are on the road driving under the influence of not just alcohol, but drugs as well. Drunk driving. DUIs, driving under the influence of drugs, is one issue. Driving under the influence of alcohol is a very serious problem. And it gives some statistics here. 28 people die each day in motor vehicles involving drug-impaired drivers. One person dies every 53 minutes. Alcohol-impaired driving accounts for 31% of driving fatalities. So the bottom line is that it's a very serious thing. And there are people oftentimes who will drive after drinking and think that they have control. But in reality, their response time to anything is slower. So, and it continues to increase. When I was practicing law years ago, the legal limit for alcohol, or the illegal limit was 0.10. Now it's 0.08 because of the fact that we're recognizing the fact that 0.08 is a level that will get you high or drunk so that you can't control. All states have driving under influence laws, and you can lose your license and privileges to drive. Okay, now when you talk about driving under the influence, there's some jurisdictions that, like Ohio says, being in the driver's position of the front seat of the vehicle or in the driver's position of a streetcar, so forth. Anyway, being in the driver's position, having possession of the vehicle's ignition keys or other ignition devices. If the vehicle is running, even if it's sitting still in park, and you're drunk, you can be held responsible under most laws for driving under influence. There is some discussion about whether or not if a person is driving under the influence and then they switch the seat, are they still guilty of driving under influence? The answer is yes, because they did. And if you're aware of that, and then the other person who gets in the seat while the car is still running then steps into the same and could be found guilty in most jurisdictions of driving under influence. It's a well-known fact here in Illinois that if you are even asleep under the wheel and the keys are in the ignition and you're driving under influence, you're going to end up with a driving under influence. And the reason is because there's that potential for you to start that car and so forth. It says other states have laws that it's illegal to be under physical control while under an influence. Having physical control of a vehicle, just physical control. So again, that's the point I was talking about earlier. Now, I have represented a few people in instances where people were drunk or intoxicated and resulted in a person being killed. And those usually take place with one of these three elements. If a person operates a motor vehicle while under the influence of drug, alcohol, with a blood alcohol content of 0.8, as I said, or if the driver is considered impaired, cause the death of another. That's vehicular homicide, and individuals in various jurisdictions have various methods. It's important to note that specific intent is not an element in drunk driving. Just the operation of the vehicle or in physical control upon the highway, roadway, driveway, or parking lot while impaired is prohibited. And so, you know, it talks about details in that. Then it talks about DUI. Observations to prove impairment. It just tells you driving behavior examples: weaving, driving through a traffic signal, striking a curb, driving over the lines, and things like that. I'm not going to click on these. I'll just click on a couple. Physical appearance: odor of intoxicants, red or bloodshot eyes, slurred speech, horizontal gaze in your eyes, walk and turn test, one-legged. These are all different kind of performance tests. Driving behaviors, as I said, weaving, driving through, striking a curb, and those are them again. So you can see that from the beginning. Go back in there, okay. Drug driving is another problem, as I already said. The key thing is if you're impaired. And unlike alcohol, it's not as easy to prove. However, though, it generally occurs when a person has used even a prescription drug. But there are times when those individuals didn't intentionally do so, but impairments caused by prescription drugs is very difficult because the person doesn't do it intentionally. Okay, so I'm not going to go over this video. You can take time to look at that yourself, dealing while driving under influence. Distracted driving, that's what we get in terms of people doing all kinds of things, talking on the cell phone. And here's a law in Illinois. As a distracted driver becomes more prominent, texting while driving or emailing while driving. And so we now have in our jurisdiction hands-free. Electronic device included but not limited to a handheld wireless phone, handheld, but does not include a global a GPS or navigation system. I always wondered about that. I see these in the front of vehicles, and I know people focus on them, but you know, it seems to me that it reaches a stage where we have to reconsider GPSs. Maybe we can just use verbal responses the way I have on MapQuest, for example, that tells me. But if you have to look at a screen or some kind of indicator, that to me is a form of distracted driving. But distracted driving has created accidents, deaths, and many other situations. Okay. Hate crime. Okay, we're going to conclude by dealing with hate crimes now. Hate crimes pretty much are crimes that would ordinarily not be as serious, but for the fact that they're taking place because of a person's race, sexual preference, or their disability, and that what they do is they increase the possible sentence because of the fact that we don't want this happening to people. It says, although it may appear in this issue, we discover that proving hate crime laws can be quite challenging. Many of us have immoral thoughts, but if you act on them, then the law says that you have violated the law. Hate law legislation first came about in actually the 60s, in the Federal Hate Crime Act, which is now found under Chapter 18, which, by the way, is the Criminal Code section of the United States Code, Section 249, making it a crime to use or threaten to use force against a person because of their race, color, religion, or national origin. Since that time, though, federal hate crime legislation has added sexual orientation, gender identity, or disability. And so states, almost all the states, have created their own form of statutes, including Illinois. And people are incarcerated for regular batteries when they commit these crimes, including that element. And that's the key thing there. So, and you can take a look at these various states and so forth, okay? Tells where they fall in terms of first degree, second degree, and so forth. Okay, make sure you do go over the key terms. I always remind you again, all you have to do is click, and I said I recommend using the flashcards, which will then open up, you know, a substance that is substantially similar to a chemical structure of a Schedule 1, 2, such as designer drugs, K2, or spice, which are substantially similar to marijuana and therefore are controlled substance. And you flip the card and you'll see controlled substance analog. Next. Activity that diverts the attention from driving, including talking or texting on your phone, eating and drinking, talking to people in your vehicle, fiddling with the stereo, so forth and so on. We call it distracted driving. And then you can go on, okay? So I'm not going to go over any more of those, okay? All right, let's go back to, okay. So you got your key terms. Take the key terms out of there. Okay. So now you come down to the bottom. Again, this is helping you to prepare for your exams that's coming up next week, week 6. You had one in week 3, and you have an exam coming up in week 6. 8 crimes, okay. Key terms. And then for practice, you go over these scenarios and so forth. Identify the drug schedule for practice. You can go and click on that and it'll open up. And then there's a practice quiz, which is similar to the upcoming quiz in Module 6, okay? So now, let's go back. I have previously sent you this information. This is the outline or PowerPoints that you can go over that, again, gives you an out summary of the topics that are covered in the book and gives you a few cases that we won't go into detail on. Okay, then it tells you about the schedules, drugs, and alcohol. Just going through it quickly to show you driving under influence, explaining it, and that's it. So it's just 16 of them, okay? So go back. But you can take a look at those. Those will help you to refresh your memory for preparation of the exam. And so with that, I am going to give you a keyword, and the keyword I'm looking for is DUI, or you can say driving under influence. Okay, that's what I'm going to be looking for you to get your points. All right, so I will see you this Friday. Remind you the special time for May 4th at 8:30, our final lecture. Okay, try to make it if you can, because there are some questions that you might have. But again, I repeat again, your assignments will be better if you will learn to just go with the rubric. Okay, so I'm going to say good night to you at this time.